Be me, Miles. Nearing 30, nothing flashy about my resume. I work in logistics, the unglamorous art of making sure chaos doesn't win. My days are spent untangling routes, deadlines, and moving parts, so everything lands where it's supposed to. The job's reliable, the paycheck clears, and my weekends are mine. I'm not built for all-night ragers. My idea of a good Friday night is ordering a pizza, playing some strategy games online with a couple of buddies, or working on a model kit. I like building things, having something tangible to show for my time. I live alone in a small but comfortable apartment that I keep pretty clean. Not a slob, but not a clean freak either, just normal. My life was pretty simple, pretty quiet. I wasn't actively looking for a relationship, been on a few dates here and there over the years, nothing ever stuck. Most of the time, it felt like a job interview where neither of us wanted the position, so I was mostly content just doing my own thing. Then I met Zoya. It was at one of those hipster coffee shops, the kind with reclaimed wood everywhere and light bulbs with the filaments showing. I was just there to grab a coffee on a Saturday morning before heading home to work on a project. She was a barista, but you could tell she wasn't just a regular employee. She was talking passionately to a coworker about some community garden project. She had this energy about her, like a firecracker, bright eyes, a quick smile, and a way of moving that was full of purpose. She took my order, and we just kind of clicked. A little bit of small talk turned into a 5-minute conversation. Found out we lived in the same part of town. I left with my coffee and her number scrawled on a napkin. Honestly, didn't expect much, but I texted her later that day. We went out for drinks a few days later. The first date was great. She was smart, funny, and had opinions on everything. She told me all about her activism. She was involved in a bunch of local groups, mostly focused on social justice stuff. At the time, I just found it interesting. It was part of what made her so passionate. It wasn't my world at all, but I liked listening to her talk about it. She had this conviction that I found genuinely impressive, even if I didn't share it. She asked me what I was passionate about. I told her about my hobbies, my job, my interest in history. She seemed to find my quiet lifestyle charming, called me her stoic rock. It felt like a good balance, her fire, my calm, yin and yang, that kind of thing. The first couple of months were honestly some of the best I've had. We spent a ton of time together. We'd go hiking, explore new restaurants, cook dinner at my place, binge-watch shows. It was easy, comfortable. Her activist stuff was still there, but it was in the background. She'd go to a meeting one night a week, maybe spend a Saturday afternoon canvassing for some cause. It was just her thing, like my gaming was my thing. We respected each other's space and interests. Or, so I thought. The first little crack appeared maybe 3 months in. It was so small I almost didn't notice it. We were scrolling on our phones on the couch, just chilling. She showed me an online petition about some new city ordinance. She told me it was really important and asked me to sign it. I read it over. It wasn't something I felt strongly about either way, and I generally don't put my name on stuff like that. I have a personal rule to keep my public life and my political opinions separate. I told her politely, "Hey, I'm happy you're involved in this, but I'd rather not sign. I try to keep a low profile with this kind of stuff." The smile on her face faded a little. Just a little. She said, "Oh, okay. I just thought you'd want to support it. It only takes a second." There was a slight edge to her voice, a hint of disappointment. I didn't think much of it, just reaffirmed that I supported her, and the subject changed. But it was the first time she'd tried to pull me into her world, and the first time I'd said no. A week or two after that, another little thing. She started talking more and more about things being problematic. We were watching an old action movie from the 80s, one of my favorites. Right in the middle of a classic, cheesy scene, she grabbed the remote and paused it. I looked at her, confused. She had this serious look on her face. She started to deconstruct the scene we'd just watched. She explained that the main character's behavior was a perfect example of toxic masculinity, how his one-liners were a defense mechanism to mask his emotional vulnerability. I was just sitting there, wanting to watch the cool explosion that was about to happen. I tried to laugh it off, said something like, "It's just a dumb action movie. It's not supposed to be that deep." That was the wrong thing to say. The look she gave me was one of genuine disapproval. She told me that uncritical consumption of media was how these harmful stereotypes get perpetuated, that by not questioning it, I was passively accepting it. We ended up having a 20-minute lecture instead of finishing the movie. I didn't argue. I just nodded and said, "I see your point," until we could finally press play again. But the mood was ruined. I couldn't enjoy the movie anymore. I felt like I was being tested, and I had given the wrong answer. This started happening more often. Everything became a potential lesson, a teachable moment. A song on the radio, a commercial on TV, a story I told about my day at work. It was all put under her ideological microscope. It was exhausting. I felt like I couldn't just relax and be myself around her anymore. I had to constantly monitor what I said, wondering if it would be deemed problematic. Then she started in on my friends. I have a small group of close friends I've known for years. Good guys. We play games. We help each other move. We talk trash about sports, normal friend stuff. I invited her to a casual barbecue at my buddy's house. She was a bit quiet, didn't really join in on the banter, which was fine. I figured she was just shy around a new group. On the car ride home, she was silent. I asked her if she had a good time. She waited a minute before answering. Then she told me she was deeply uncomfortable with the vibe of my friends. I asked her what she meant. She pointed to a joke my friend made about his own terrible luck with DIY projects, calling himself useless around the house. Zoya explained that this was a form of performative incompetence, a subtle way men reinforce gender roles by pretending they can't do domestic tasks. I was floored. I tried to explain that it was just a self-deprecating joke, that the guy literally just spent 2 weeks renovating his own kitchen. She just shook her head and said, "I didn't get it." She told me I needed to be more aware of the company I kept, because they were a reflection of my own unexamined biases. That was a tough pill to swallow. She was essentially telling me my lifelong friends were bad people, and that I was guilty by association. I defended them, of course. I told her they were great guys, and she was reading way too much into a single joke. The conversation ended in a tense silence. We didn't talk much for the rest of the evening. I started to notice a pattern. Whenever I did something she approved of, I was showered with affection. When I did something that went against her worldview, she would become cold and distant. It was subtle emotional blackmail. I was walking on eggshells all the time. The social media stuff also got worse. It went from asking me to sign a petition to tagging me in multiple posts a day, articles about patriarchy, infographics about privilege, calls to action for protests I'd never heard of. My phone was constantly buzzing with notifications from her. And if I didn't like or share them, there would be consequences. She'd send me a text. "Did you see that article I tagged you in? It's really important." It was another test, a public loyalty test. My social media page, which was once just pictures of my dog and dumb memes, was becoming a battleground. I told her again that I wanted to keep my online presence neutral. Her response was sharp this time. She told me that in the fight for justice, there was no neutral ground, that my desire to stay out of it was a form of privilege that many people don't have. It was another lecture, another way to make me feel like I was a bad person for simply wanting to live a quiet life. Things were getting strained, but I still cared about her. I kept telling myself this was just a phase, or that we could find a compromise. I was clinging to the memory of those first few months, hoping we could get back to that. The next major escalation happened a month or so later. There was a small protest being organized downtown. Something about a local company's hiring practices. It was on a Saturday afternoon. She brought it up over dinner one night. She didn't ask me if I wanted to go. She just started planning our day around it. So, the protest starts at 1 p.m. We can grab a coffee before and make some signs. It'll be great. I took a deep breath. I knew this was going to be a difficult conversation. I told her, as gently as I could, that I wasn't going to go. I explained that I had plans to work on a personal project, and that honestly, standing in a crowd shouting slogans was my personal idea of hell. I tried to be supportive in my own way. I offered to help her make her signs, to drop her off and pick her up. Anything but actually going myself. She just stared at me. The look in her eyes was not just disappointment anymore. It was closer to contempt. You'd rather stay home and play with your toys than stand up for what's right? I told her it wasn't about that it was about respecting my personal boundaries. I said, Zoya, I respect your passion for this. I truly do. But you have to respect that it's your passion, not mine. I can't be you. She pushed her plate away, her appetite apparently gone. I don't want you to be me, she said, her voice dripping with ice. I just wanted you to be a supportive partner. The implication was clear. My support was worthless unless it was performed exactly the way she wanted. She ended up going to the protest alone. When she came back, she was distant and cold. She barely spoke to me for 2 days. The message was crystal clear: comply, or be punished with silence. It was around this time I had a conversation with one of my friends, the one she'd called problematic. We were just catching up, and he asked me how things were going with Zoya. I'm not the type to air my dirty laundry, but I was feeling stressed and just kind of let it all out. I told him about the constant tests, the lectures, the pressure to conform to her beliefs. He listened patiently, didn't interrupt once. When I was done, he just looked at me and said, Dude, that sounds rough. It sounds less like a relationship and more like a probationary period for a job you never applied for. That line hit me hard, because it was true. I felt like I was constantly being evaluated and always coming up short. He told me that a good partner should make you feel better about yourself, not worse. His simple, straightforward take on the situation made me realize how twisted my perspective had become. I had been so focused on trying to please her and keep the peace that I hadn't stopped to think about how unhappy I was. The final stage began when she started talking about her activist circle. She was part of a small, tight-knit group of like-minded people, her comrades, as she sometimes called them. Up until this point, I had never met them. I had only heard stories. She decided it was time for me to be introduced. She framed it as a casual get-together at her friend's apartment. I was hesitant, but I agreed to go. I thought maybe if I met them, I'd understand her world better. That was a huge mistake. The apartment was filled with maybe 10 people. It felt less like a party and more like a political strategy meeting. The air was thick with jargon and righteous anger. They were all talking over each other about systems of oppression, intersectionality, and direct action. Zoya introduced me, and the conversation briefly stopped. All eyes turned to me. I felt like a bug under a microscope. One of the guys, a dude with a thick beard and an intense stare, looked me up and down. So, you're the one Zoya's been telling us about, he said. It wasn't a friendly question. I tried to be nice, reached out a hand to shake. He just looked at my hand and then back at my face. We're not really into patriarchal gestures like handshakes here, he said, completely serious. The entire room went quiet. I just awkwardly pulled my hand back, feeling like a complete idiot. I spent the next hour in a corner, nursing a warm beer, while Zoya was completely absorbed by her friends. I tried to join the conversation a couple of times, but it was impossible. They were speaking a different language. Any attempt I made to relate their abstract concepts to my own real-world experience was immediately shut down as missing the point or speaking from a place of privilege. I was an outsider, a suspect. The worst part was seeing Zoya in that environment. She was different, more militant, more performative. She laughed louder at their inside jokes. She used even more academic jargon. It was like she was trying to prove to them that even though she was dating me, she was still one of them. At one point, I overheard the intense stare guy talking to Zoya, just loud enough for me to hear. He was gesturing towards me. I don't know, Zoya. He seems unradicalized. Are you sure he's an ally? She put a hand on his arm and said something I couldn't quite hear, but it sounded like she was defending her choice. Or maybe defending me, but the fact that she even had to was humiliating. I felt like her pet project, her problematic boyfriend that she was trying to rehabilitate. I left that party feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life. I knew, deep down, that this was never going to work. Our worlds weren't just different. They were fundamentally incompatible. My world was about finding common ground, about treating people as individuals, about living and let live. Her world, or at least the one she inhabited with her friends, was about dividing everyone into groups, about seeing systems and power dynamics instead of people, about fighting a constant war that I didn't want to be a part of. The drive home was silent again. But this time it wasn't an angry silence. It was a dead silence, the silence of something that has already ended, but no one has said it out loud yet. I knew a final confrontation was coming. I just didn't know it would be so soon. The weeks following that party were strange. The tension in our apartment was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Zoya was civil, but distant. The warmth was gone. It felt like living with a roommate who secretly resented you. The little things stopped. No more random hugs in the kitchen. No more laughing at stupid jokes while watching TV. Every interaction was polite, formal, and empty. I felt like I was being punished for failing the test with her friends. I tried to bridge the gap a few times. I suggested we go for a hike, like we used to. She told me she was busy planning for an upcoming event. I suggested we cook a nice meal together over the weekend. She informed me she had a strategy session with her activist group that would take all day. Every attempt I made was rebuffed. It was clear I was on the outside now. I was in a state of probation, and she was the warden. My own apartment started to feel less like a home and more like a holding cell. I spent more time on my own, working on my projects in my little workshop corner, just to have a space that felt like my own. Then she dropped the bomb. It was about 2 weeks before the big one, a city-wide event she had been talking about for months, the March for Equality. For her, this was the Super Bowl of activism. She came into the living room one evening. I was on my laptop, just browsing. She stood in front of the TV, blocking my view, holding a tablet. She didn't have her usual passionate energy. This was different. This was deadly serious. "We need to talk about the march," she said. I closed my laptop. "Okay, what's up?" She showed me the tablet. It was a registration form for the event. "I'm signing us up as volunteers for the setup crew. We need to be there at 7 a.m. to help unload the stage equipment." Notice the wording. I'm signing us up. Not, would you like to? Not, are you interested? It was a declaration. I looked at her, and I knew this was it. This was the final hill. I decided right then that I wasn't going to walk on eggshells anymore. I was done trying to appease her. I was just going to be honest. "Zoya, I'm not going to the march," I said. I said it quietly, without anger. Just a simple statement of fact. She blinked, as if she hadn't heard me correctly. What did you just say?" "I'm not going," I repeated. "I'm happy to support you from home. I can make you a thermos of coffee for the morning. I can pick you up when it's over. But I'm not going to be there." A storm gathered on her face. Her eyes narrowed. "After everything we've talked about? After you saw how important this is to me? You're still refusing?" "It's not about refusing to support you," I tried to explain. "It's about me being my own person. This is your world, Zoya, not mine. And forcing me to participate isn't going to make it mine." She let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a nasty sound. "Your own person? What does that even mean? You have a choice here, Miles. You can either stand on the right side of history, or you can stay home and tacitly support the oppressors." There it was, the black and white worldview where any dissent from her exact position was an act of evil. "This isn't history class," I said, my voice still even. "This is our life. And in our life, I should be allowed to have a Saturday to myself without being called an oppressor." Her face was getting red. "You just don't get it. You never have. This is bigger than your Saturday to yourself. This is about solidarity. This is about showing the world that we are united against injustice, and my partner, of all people, needs to be standing beside me." Her voice was rising with every sentence. "So, what you're saying is, my presence is required as a prop?" I asked. "You don't care if I believe in it, you just need me to be there to complete the picture of the happy activist couple?" That hit a nerve, a raw one. "How dare you?" she hissed. "I want you there because I thought you were a good person. I thought you shared my core values of empathy and justice. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe you're just another selfish man who can't handle being with a strong woman who challenges him." The insults just rolled off my back at that point. I had heard them all before in her little lectures. They had lost their power. I just sat there looking at her, and I felt nothing. Just a deep, profound sadness for what our relationship had become. She was pacing back and forth now, running her hands through her hair. She was working herself up to the grand finale. I could feel it coming. She stopped pacing and turned to face me, planting her feet like she was about to give a speech. Her expression was one of absolute certainty. She thought she held the ultimate trump card. "Okay," she said, her voice suddenly low and dangerously calm. "Okay, let's make this very, very simple, so even you can understand." She took a step closer. "This march is everything to me. It's the culmination of months of work. It represents everything I stand for. My friends will be there. My community will be there. It is the most important day of the year for me." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "If you love me, and if you respect me, and if you are not the selfish, privileged man I am starting to think you are, you will be there with me. You will be there at 7 a.m., you will help set up, and you will march beside me, carrying a sign." Her eyes were locked on mine. There was no room for negotiation. "If you are not there," she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, "then I will know everything I need to know about you and about us. If you are not there, then when I come home, I don't want to find you here. We will be done. It's that simple." She delivered the final line with a sense of triumph. She had laid her trap perfectly in her mind. She had made it a choice between the relationship and a single Saturday. To her, the answer was obvious. No sane person would throw away a relationship over something so trivial. She thought she was just formalizing the pressure she'd been applying for months. She truly, 100% believed she had just won. "I'll let you think about your decision," she said, with an air of finality. She then turned and walked into our bedroom, closing the door behind her with a soft click. She left me alone in the living room, in the silence. She expected me to panic, to agonize, to come crawling to the bedroom door in 5 minutes, begging for forgiveness and promising to be the best little volunteer she'd ever seen. I didn't move. I just sat there on the couch, replaying her words in my head. If you are not there, we will be done. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of clarity. She had finally said it out loud. She had made the subtext into text. Our relationship wasn't a partnership. It was a conditional contract. My compliance was a term of service. Her love and affection were benefits I only received as long as I adhered to the terms. And I was tired. So tired of it all. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I just felt released. She had just handed me the key to my own cage, thinking it was a chain. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes. The silence in the apartment was absolute. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through my contacts and called my friend, the one who said it sounded like a probationary period. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey man, what's up?" I didn't beat around the bush. "Hey, you have a minute? Zoya and I just had a conversation." I explained the situation to him, calmly, factually. I told him about the march, the demand, and the ultimatum. I relayed her exact words. "If I'm not there, we're done." He was quiet on the other end of the line for a moment. Then he just said, "Wow, so she's really putting it all on the line, huh? What are you going to do?" I took a breath. "I'm not going," I said. There was another pause. "Good for you, man," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "Seriously? Good for you?" We talked for a few more minutes. He offered me his couch if I needed it. I told him I appreciated it, and that I'd call him back later. We hung up. That conversation solidified it. Hearing a sane, outside perspective confirmed I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the bad guy here. I was just a guy who wanted to be respected. I stood up from the couch. I walked over to the bedroom door. I didn't knock. I just opened it and walked in. Zoya was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling on her phone. She was pretending to be casual, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She looked up at me, a carefully constructed neutral expression on her face, but her eyes held a spark of smug expectation. She was waiting for my surrender. "So," she said, putting her phone down, "have you come to your senses?" I stood there in the doorway, about 10 feet away from her. I didn't try to argue. I didn't try to explain myself again. I just gave her the answer she asked for. "Yes, I've thought about it." A small, triumphant smile started to form on her lips. "And?" she prompted. "I'm not going to the march," I said. The smile vanished. It was like watching a computer program crash in real time. Her face went through 3 distinct phases in about 2 seconds. First, confusion. Her brow furrowed. It was clear her brain was refusing to process what I'd just said. "I'm sorry. What?" she stammered. Second, denial. A flicker of nervous laughter escaped her lips. "This is a joke, right? This isn't funny, Miles." I just looked at her, my expression unchanged. Then came the third phase, shock. Her jaw literally dropped. Her eyes went wide. The full reality of the situation hit her like a physical blow. She had overplayed her hand, and she had just lost everything. "So," I continued, my voice still quiet and calm, "as you said, that means we're done. I'll just pack a bag with some essentials for now, and I'll arrange a time to come back for the rest of my things later." She shot up from the bed. "You can't be serious," she yelled, her voice cracking. "You're breaking up with me? You're throwing all of this away over one stupid march?" It was incredible. She was trying to frame it as my decision, as me being the one to end things. "I'm not the one who made it a condition of our relationship," I said. "You did. You gave me the choice. I'm just respecting your terms." The shock on her face was now rapidly being replaced by pure, unfiltered rage. "Respecting my terms? Don't you dare twist this. This is because you're a coward. You're so trapped in your pathetic little comfort zone that you'd rather end a relationship than face the real world for one afternoon." I didn't respond. I turned around, walked to the closet, and pulled out my duffel bag from the top shelf. I laid it on the bed, on the side that used to be mine, and started calmly taking a few shirts out of a drawer. Seeing me actually packing seemed to break something inside her. She started screaming. "You are unbelievable. You're just another fragile man who can't handle a woman with a passion. You just wanted me to be quiet and sit on your couch and watch your stupid movies. You never supported me. Not really." I continued to pack. A few pairs of socks, a toothbrush from the bathroom. Each item I placed in the bag was like a nail in the coffin of her world view. Her entire strategy was based on the assumption of my emotional weakness, my fear of losing her. She was watching that assumption crumble before her very eyes, and it was driving her insane. "This is about your ego," she shouted, tears now streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of fury. "You just couldn't handle that I was part of something bigger than you, something important." I zipped up the bag. It wasn't very full, just enough for a few days. I slung it over my shoulder and walked towards the bedroom door. She stood in my way, blocking the exit. "You are not walking out that door," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "We are going to talk about this." "There's nothing left to talk about," I said, looking her in the eye for the last time. "You made the rules, Zoya. I just decided to play the game." I moved to the side to walk past her. For a second, I thought she might physically try to stop me, but she didn't. She just stood there, defeated, and let me pass. I walked out of the bedroom, through the living room where it had all ended, and to the front door of the apartment. I put my hand on the doorknob. I paused, and I said one last thing, without turning around to look at her. For what it's worth, it was never about the march. It was about you trying to turn me into someone I'm not. It was about respect. Then I opened the door, stepped out into the hallway, and closed it behind me. I didn't hear a sound from inside, just silence. The deafening silence of a battle that was lost before it had even begun. And as I walked down the stairs and out into the cool night air, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I felt free.